Good afternoon, everybody. This is Elisa Baum. I am GridGain's Director of Product Marketing. We'll begin shortly, but first I'd like to conduct some housekeeping. Could you please raise your hand using the hand icon located in the GoToWebinar control panel to let me know that you can hear me? And let me see here. Oh, great. I see that people can hear me. That's good. Next, during this webinar, you will be on mute, but should you have any questions during the discussion, please go ahead and enter them in the questions field within the control panel. At the end of the discussion, we will take time to answer as many of these questions as possible, and those that aren't addressed will be answered in a follow-up blog entry on the GridGain blog. In addition, you'll get a copy of both the recording of this webinar and the slides within 48 hours after the event is over. With that said, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. It's called Transforming Asset and Wealth Management with In-Memory Computing, and it's being presented by industry consultant Eric Karpman. And with that said, I'll turn the floor over to Eric. Go ahead there.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, regardless of where you are. I know that our audience is growing and we're now covering all regions, all geographies, so I'm happy about that. And I'll try to keep the topic in global in perspective, so to cover interests of a lot of people on the call, on the webinar. And as Alyssa said, this is a continuation of our series. So we've covered many different topics around financial technology and how in-memory data fabric and in-memory computing in general can help to answer some of the pressing issues that are with us in this industry. So today we will talk about the asset and wealth management sector of financial industry, and I'll cover some of the issues and some of the changes that are happening with this in industry and this section of the industry, and then I'll explain how technology in general is helping in this sector to achieve new heights and being successful and profitable. And then I'll cover also the in-memory GridGain's in-memory data computing platform, and will provide some case studies where we are helping financial technology, financial industry, as well as some of the other industries in improving their technologies and addressing some of those needs that the industry asks us to deliver. So let's start talking about today the shifts and the situation within the financial industry, specifically around asset and wealth management. Let's talk about three main themes that I'm observing in this industry, and those are related to demographics, regulation, and technology. Right? Those, I would say, probably the three foundation blocks onto which the changes that are coming in the industries are building themselves upon. And let's zoom into those three trends and seeing how the asset management and wealth management industries are changing, and how the shift is happening from institutional to retail money, and the growth in demand for multi-asset class strategies. So first, like I said, there are changes in demographics. We are seeing that more and more investors are younger. They are used to dealing with non-traditional ways of investing and finding liquidity and finding opportunities in investing. And therefore we're seeing a lot of non-traditional players, non-banks, non-financial institutions that are also offering opportunities for those new investors to invest into, like crowdfunding, like all those technology platforms that younger generation is using. They're also offering financial investment solutions through different online mechanisms, there are options for those individuals to invest. There are a lot of startups that also offering opportunities for interested individuals to invest. So there are lots of opportunities there. As I also mentioned earlier, there's a shift from institutional investment to individual investment. Before, it used to be funds-oriented approach where a lot of people were investing into funds and then they would go into large institutional investment firms that would make decisions on behalf of a larger group of individuals, larger group of strategies. I think the shift is clearly more towards individual approach, where those individuals investing don't like to be part of the pools. They want to make investment decisions themselves. They want to know what's going on. They want to be alerted of any changes with their holdings. They want to be much more actively participating in those decisions, and they want them to be tailored to their particular needs. As I also mentioned, multi-asset strategies is another growing category where people are not really stuck to traditional investment vehicles like equities, like fixed income, municipal bonds, and so on. They're interested in overall strategies that will address their particular investment horizons. They know what they're saving for, they know when they need the money, they know what different stages of their life they need to expect, and they need to be prepared for them, and they want to make sure that the strategies in which they invest are again tailored to their needs and cover multiple asset classes. There are also multiple sources of advice, right? It used to be that with the previous way that wealth and asset management industries worked, there would be dedicated asset managers or advisors that would work with an individual and guide them through different investment opportunities. I think today, again, the newer generation of investment is asking for more. They're looking for different advice. They're looking for peers' recommendations. They're looking for comparisons. They're looking for transparency and explanation of how their investment is performing independently from the investment broker or investment manager through which they've originally invested into the strategy. There are goals-based solutions versus benchmarks. It used to be that traditionally you would invest into a fund. The fund was following a particular benchmark and would show the results based on the benchmark. Okay, we've overperformed S&P 500, or we've underperformed Dow Jones Industrial Index or something like that. And then based on that, they would be showing their performance and demanding compensation. I think, again, with this newer approach of a different generation demanding different types of solutions, which are goals-operated, goals-based, not benchmarks. So they want to work with all different asset classes. They want to deal with different strategies to make sure that they, once they have a certain number in mind, I want to be at 6%, I want to be at 10%, I want to be at 12%, they want to build their solution around their particular goal and not a benchmark that's coming out from the street. Social investing, another great area, and I'm seeing a lot of interest there, right? Because again, a lot of representatives of the newer generation, they're much more social minded or social conscious than their parents and grandparents used to be. So they are interested in, okay, what is the social impact of our investment? What type of companies am I investing into? What type of funds? Who is working at those firms? How that firm is investing their profits and all that stuff, which is not so much EPS and fundamentals based, like a traditional financial analysis requires you to do, but much more into the social aspect and social results of that investment. There's definitely an increased competition. We kind of just talked about this, that as we have many more non-traditional players coming in, as we have more demands, electronic and technology demands from this younger generation, so is the competition. And those traditional larger players, larger investment powerhouses, are facing competition from little players with 2, 3 guys, but greater technology that is picking up more and more. So I'm seeing that all over the place, and it's obviously a major concern for those large organizations, and they're trying to improve their technology. They're trying to address all those requirements and demographics that we've just talked about to make sure they stay ahead of the competition. Economies of scale are important, but also important from the point of view that there is no need to have multiple advisors, multiple investment management platforms, multiple phases, risk management, and so on in all different places. It's easier if you consolidate particular functions to be provided to different small and large investment management firms to use. And that's what I mean by economies of scale. Not so much in terms of in terms of the number of people working for the firm, but in terms of utilizing common platforms to kind of share similar common and shared functions. New distribution channels, obviously, as I've mentioned before, there's more demand on online, mobile, watch-based, all kinds of other, social media, all kinds of distribution channels where the decision can be made to utilize a financial services firm. In addition to just communications channels as they are used to be known now. Obviously, also with fees and margins, there is a pressure because there is more information, because there is a move towards transparency in the market. The firms cannot charge the fees that they used to before, and so that also adds pressure on the competition and competitive nature of the fees that those companies charge. And the market volatility is also there, that it's not in a post-crisis, post-financial crisis world in which we operate. The market volatility is 20-25% higher than what it used to be prior to that. And so we kind of realize that we need to understand that we're still going to be living in this turbulent world, and the strategies and the types of investments we make has to address that increased volatility. And then obviously the regulatory oversight, right? It's another second big trend that we're seeing, and I'll have another slide on that, and we'll talk a couple of minutes about that specifically. But just to give you an idea that there is tremendous oversight that's being provided now by the government about the investment management in general. What type of investments people are doing? Are they making the right decisions? Are they making the informed decisions? How is the reporting done for those decisions that they've made? It's every step of the way there is an additional piece of legislation, additional reporting requirements, additional risk management framework requirement around those investments. And again, the firms have to find money or have to invest into technology that will address those needs. And then finally, but most importantly, I would say the changes in technology. And that's where most of the previous two issues, demographics and regulatory issues, are addressed by technology, right? That's where all that new digital content is provided, the outsourcing to cloud platforms, mobility, real-time, increased pressure and performance, and regulatory, real-time regulatory requests is coming from. Now let's talk a little bit deeper into each of those categories. For example, demographics, right? And I kind of mentioned that there is it's much the trend is such that the younger generation is investing more and more, and already close to over passing the previous generation in the investments. And that's true. I mean, younger and technology empowered, they're making more money, they're saving much more than their previous generations, and they're willing to invest it for longer terms. Longevity is also a factor here, that as people live longer, there is also a tendency of longer term investments than it used to be with previous generations. There's an expectation of a longer time frame as people invest when they're younger and they expect to live longer. Um, uh, Also, it's used to be within the investment and especially wealth management industries. We talked about accumulation of wealth. I think people are talking now from accumulation to decumulation of wealth, as you're passing on wealth from the previous generation to the next generation. How do you change your preferences? How do you change your vehicles in which you invest? High asset attrition rate is because of increased competition, because of different asset requirements of a new generation. It's easier for younger generation to keep moving money from one investment firm to another without much of concern about history with dealing with that particular firm. Also, whomever has innovative ideas wins a lot of that competition from the younger generation, as they are looking for innovation. They are looking for something different that's going to attract their interest. And we kind of mentioned personalization of effortless advice, right? So effortless to me is, that mobile, online, non-human interaction that you can get in real time with your money, basically, and then also being able to invest, reinvest, make personal decisions about what to do with your money, and in real time being able to have access and being able to rebalance your portfolios based on your personal preferences at any one point. More risk diversity is also people are not necessarily, younger people not necessarily looking into traditional risk management models. They're looking into all other aspects of social investments, of startups, of different funds that cater to their needs, and trying to work with those and come up with an acceptable risk appetite. Global growth is also a big area where obviously globalization plays a role, and the world is smaller because it's online, because you have access to all those different funds from any one country, and that increases competition and increases different options to choose from on a global scale. Also, 24/7 is another big area here that you're looking for real-time real-time access to technology, to customers wherever they are, and that's another big area here. And then customer-centric business model is kind of related to the idea that you need to put the customer first and make sure that they are the customer service, all those different digital channels that you're operating are in line with the customer demands. Now we've gotten to this point of covering regulatory changes, and kind of mentioned that there are a lot of regulations around different areas of wealth and asset management industries, and obviously it's hard to talk about every one of them, as it's probably going to take us an hour or so to do so, but I just wanted to maybe touch upon different categories that exist there. Well, obviously, U.S. elections, right? So there's still uncertainty about what happens with the regulatory changes, right? Some of them may be changed, some of them may be removed, some of them may be modified. So keep in mind that this is an area into which we're going to be coming back to, and especially in our future webinars, I'll definitely be covering this and talking more about how the new administration is addressing the regulations. Because as you've seen, if you've attended my webinars before, and as if you'll be attending them in the future, you'll see I'll always pay great attention to regulatory changes and regulatory issues related to each part of the industries, because I believe a lot of investment, a lot of technology investments especially, are are going into addressing those changes. So I will be talking in the next webinars about how the new administration is changing those regulations. But for now, the main areas are around capital planning and stress testing, right? As there's a lots of regulations around that and what needs to be done and how to make sure that the investments are adequate and the firms maintain healthy balance sheets about the investments that they receive from individuals. There are also new rules around data quality, data analytics, and data reporting, where regulators have increasingly made clear that they expect all different financial institutions to have the capabilities in-house to access and provide various types of high-quality data and provide mechanisms for internal reporting and regulatory reporting for the trades, for transactions, for orders that they receive from their clients. So we have specific regulations around that and what's allowed and what's not allowed for the firms to do. There are also additional regulatory initiatives around cyber threats and cyber risk that I'm seeing popping up around that companies have to establish certain anti-fraud and cybersecurity programs to comply with various requirements and regulations around that space. A lot of regulations around consumer protection, right, where basically the expectation is that the firms will have strong compliance programs that will make sure that the customers are aware of where they're investing, what happens with their money, how they're covered, how they're not covered. All this information must be available within a approved program run by those financial institutions. Liquidity is another big area where basically the financial institutions need to apply different frameworks to cover different liquidity coverage ratios and different institution monitoring reporting requirements that have been put together for this. And then also data governance and risk management frameworks by the Federal Reserve Bank and some other financial regulators. They basically require to set, they've set up the guidelines and they require financial institutions to address to those guidelines and have a specific governance frameworks that would follow those guidelines. And then they come to those financial institutions and they assess how ready they are and what type of controls they put in place for this. They need to demonstrate how they manage their risks, how the product selection process is governed when the individual customers are choosing between representations of different product categories. Then there's some regulation around foreign banking organizations and how those will be set up, so to make sure there is no extra benefit provided by to the foreign institutions if they are dealing with U.S. clients here in the States. Um, some areas of around financial crime risk, especially there's an extension to USA Patriot Act and some financial crimes compliance regulations around that, making sure that companies have tools and techniques to combat financial crimes and report them correctly, and have it a part of their overall financial operational routine. Well, and then technology, as I mentioned earlier, I believe it's one of the main categories here that is used to make or break those financial institutions and how they address the needs of this new changing demographic and changing requests from their customers. And obviously, the digital channels need to be set up, and similar type of advice, similar type of routines and requests and account setups and everything else that you do with within asset and wealth management functions need to be similar, regardless of which digital channel is being used. Big data and data management becoming important, as you need to analyze your data for regulatory and for any of the analytical needs that you do for yourself and you provide to your clients. Cloud is becoming also an important part where you outsource a lot of things. If you don't need to customize an offering, you can use a cloud and do it in a cheaper and better fashion around the cloud. The distribution platforms also, it's related to social media, as you have links to different social media sites and provide opportunities to market on those sites and also to receive requests and provide quotes based on the presence of your customer on a particular site. Content automation is another big area here that you're trying to automate in a friendly manner, between the communications between the customer and the financial advisor. And that brings us to the robo-advisor role, where there's no human advisors available, but based on the recommendations and based on the requirements and based on certain classifications and criteria provided, the robo-advisor can select the right investments for you and present to you, and everything can be done in a virtual fashion. The virtual reality experience is another thing that a lot of some of the wealth management firms are utilizing right now, as they believe that there's a better way of visualizing performance of different funds and the contributions and style and different ways that the firms are organized within your portfolios in some kind of digital virtual reality fashion. And I know a couple of firms that are doing this actively. There's an advanced analytics area here that is also important in in providing analysis mechanism for people to individually source inventories of different assets and deciding what they need in their portfolios, as well as scenario analysis, which is somewhat related to risk management, but basically as the market is moving into a particular direction, want to make sure that you are prepared to those changes and you can model it within your analytical packages. Then we have low latency. Obviously, it's important that all of those decisions are done in a real-time fashion. So again, latency and performance are really critical here. Behavioral analysis, neural network heuristics, again, related to quick analytical capabilities of finding what you're looking for and addressing the needs. Complex event processing, again, talks about real-time addressing, where you can specify your automated strategy and make sure that the algorithm or some kind of model that you're working with can process the data as it's available in the market and make a decision for you based on the parameters that you've set up in an automated fashion. The digital experience, obviously, you want to be notified onto your mobile or online channels of the changes to your portfolio, anything that's happening within your changes there. And mobile technology, as I mentioned, is a key aspect here. Is again, the younger generation is demanding real-time notifications onto their mobile devices. And open source and open architecture are also critical here, that you want a smooth integration of your technological platform with all other platforms available. You want to make sure that everything is using some kind of open source, open architecture opportunities for ease of connectivity and ease of adding functionality to the products. Security is a key here, as I mentioned earlier, that there are certain regulatory requirements even around security and cybersecurity, and you want to make sure that your platform, your technology platform you're operating, is as secure as possible to be compliant with those regulations. And then some people also talk about blockchain. We had a webinar on that, as at that time we talked about many firms, maybe financial firms, moving into blockchain and communicating messages and instructing them of what to do, and also using blockchain and bitcoins for payments options as well. So this is a growing area, and within wealth and asset management firms, it's also picking up. There are more and more experiments that those firms do around blockchains, and we're waiting for results around them. And that brings us to the in-memory data computing section of our webinar, where basically I'll mention briefly what the in-memory computing does, and then we'll talk about what GridGain does within the space and how we can address those issues that we've outlined here. So obviously, in-memory grid computing is moving from disk to 100% in memory. And obviously, as you can imagine, that results in 100 times of improvement in performance without necessarily, breaking your budget. And that's the reason why many firms are moving into this now, because they can do much more with it than they could before at very reasonable costs. We've seen different financial institutions utilizing this concept for their trading platforms, for their risk management platforms, for their financial analytics, big data analytics, compliance and monitoring. So basically everything that we've talked about that is needed in the new reality of wealth and asset management firms, that you need a better risk management, that you need faster trading platforms, that you need smarter data analytics platforms, that you need to monitor and comply with multiple regulations. All of that is available to you or possible to build with in-memory grid computing. So one example I'll give you is from Sberbank, which is the largest bank in Russia and Eastern Europe, and the third largest in Europe. And basically they had the same situation, that they had a lot of customers, they had a lot of transactions, and performance was not adequate. And they're looking for to grow this in a very cost-conscious way, but at the same time being able to process all the needs that they needed to do. And what they did was they've built a system, at least for testing purposes, with 10 Dell blades with about 1 terabyte of memory that cost them about $25,000. And they've tested their normal activities from their millions of customers that would work through this platform. And they did this stress test and performance testing of about 1 billion transactions per second. And they were able to smoothly process all of this within the grid. And that's the reason they chose GridGain, because of such a performance improvement and under reasonable cost constraints. And we even have an article here from Herman Greff, the CEO of Sberbank, who mentioned that Sberbank had issues by introducing new products and dealing with increasing number of transactions, and they chose GridGain's platform, which showed them an improvement over any of the competitors, including Oracle, IBM, and some of the other ones, in a magnitude higher and performing much better, and they're able to now create significantly heavier plans on what they can do with this technology and how they can expand and what new products they can bring in. So very aggressive plans that they couldn't plan for with legacy systems. Another use case here on smart metering and utilities, IoT, which is another area, Internet of Things, Internet of Everything that's coming to us, including in financial services. But this is an example of a non-financial firm that was able to also put in information in real time that it was collecting from multiple online devices and analyze them in real time with this in-memory processing system. Third use case I wanted to show you is from Newegg.com, is one of the largest online consumer electronics stores in the United States. And again, as you can imagine, they have a lot of requests, they have a lot of online hits, they need to do this in a very high performance fashion, and they're able to do that with in-memory computing from GridGain as well. And why now is, I kind of meant, it's mainly because of cost. We could have probably used memory before, which would result in such hundreds of times improved in performance, but it wasn't cost productive. It would still be very expensive comparing with traditional disks. Now, with the cost being dropped by about 30% every 12 months, it's now very affordable to pull the memory out and build a cluster around that memory for high performance and scalable operations. And GridGain is based on Apache Ignite, which is an open source, which was also built by GridGain initially, but then sent into the open source world. And so obviously GridGain knows Apache Ignite very well as it's built it. Customers can benefit from the open source aspects of Apache Ignite, that it's available to everybody, that there's a huge community contributing to Apache Ignite, but at the same time GridGain realized that some of the enterprise features are still needed for enterprise customers, such as financial institutions, on top of the advantages of the open source architecture. And so that's what GridGain basically provides, is that additional servicing around the open source platform. And what's an in-memory data fabric? Well, it's a high-performance platform for computing and transacting on large-scale data sets in near real time, where we have different grids all connected to each other, and you can provide many functions with them, such as you can do all this in-memory SQL processing, high-performance computing, risk analysis, algorithmic analysis, complex event processing that I mentioned earlier, in-memory file systems, and full fault tolerance and redundancy of different systems within different nodes within the cluster. All of this is available now within one platform. And the platform is also important to be truly open source, to being able to accommodate requests using different languages coming into the platform. So GridGain is able to accommodate all the C++, SQL, .NET, Java, any basic language, any enterprise applications accessing this in-memory data fabric. And also it can work with both structured and unstructured SQL in creating this high-performance layer. But in addition, like I mentioned before, there are a lot of enterprise features that are needed to make this system acceptable for financial institutions. And that's where you have, in addition to your low latency and high performance engines and processing mechanisms, you also have high availability and scalability and high availability with a full data center replication and backups and full tolerance that's needed, that's required by a lot of financial regulations of stability of financial transactions. The transactions by themselves are, fully compliant, and all the states are recorded. There's a way of rollback to different states within the transactions. All of that is available within the system, as well as I said, persistence across different databases, as well as some of the tiered memory that's also available for persistence, and then full security feature set with authentication, authorization, encryption, tracing, auditing, everything that the financial institution will require. So in a nutshell, what's Apache Ignite? Well, those are the in-memory data grids and servicing grids and streaming and clustering that's available out of the box with this open source product. But then GridGain Enterprise comes in and it adds on this additional management, monitoring, enterprise-grade security, data center replication, enterprise-level support and security updates, and all of this is available with the annual license subscription from GridGain, as well as their consulting services and professional services that can help to quickly set the system up. And I think that's about it. We have about 15 minutes or so in case anybody has questions, and I'll be happy to take them and answer them at this time. Thank you.
Hi, Eric. There are no questions. Audience, if you have any questions for Eric, go ahead and enter them in the GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll make sure he gets them. Let's give everybody just a minute here. You must have done a very thorough job. Okay, well, I guess that brings us to the end of our webinar. Eric, thank you so much for a great presentation, and audience, thank you for attending. I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on where you're calling in from. Eric, thank you again.
Thank you, and see you all at the next webinar in about a month. Thank you.
Thank you.